Hi, and welcome to today's edition of the Oxford Centre for Personalised Medicine Flash interview series, where we discuss personalised medicine with people involved in the field in one form or another. Our guest today is Professor Nina Hallowell from the Ethox Centre and Wellcome Centre for Ethics and Humanities at the University of Oxford. Hi Nina, it's great to meet you. Could you kick off by telling us a bit more about yourself and where you've come from?
Hi, Catherine. Thanks so much for inviting me to this interview. It's a great pleasure to talk to you today. So I am actually a sociologist who's worked for over 25 years on the social and ethical implications of introducing genetics into the clinic. I started my life as a psychologist in actuality, and I have degrees in general linguistics and medical ethics and law. And I became involved in researching social and ethical implications of genomics and genetics in the mid-90s when I went to work at the Centre for Family Research in Cambridge on a project looking at inherited forms of breast and ovarian cancer. And I've been interested in these issues ever since. And for the last 3 years, I was a member of the steering group of the Centre for Personalised Medicine here in Oxford, and I've enjoyed being involved in many different activities that the Centre's put on: conferences, designing public engagement materials, citizens' juries, and so on and so forth. And it has been a super interesting experience, and I just love the work that the CPM does.
Brilliant, thank you. So when I say personalised medicine, what does that mean to you as a sociologist?
Well, personalised medicine for me is about tailoring healthcare to personal circumstances, using genomic and other forms of data to design healthcare solutions for individuals. And by solutions here, I mean diagnosis, prognosis, and of course, treatment. Now, I'm interested on the impact of genetics on the self and the family and wider society. So my research really looks at how different types of stakeholders, that's patients, clinicians, general public, technology providers, and policymakers, understand and identify ethical issues arising from the introduction of genetics, genomics, big data, and AI in healthcare. So clearly the use of data in personalised medicine is well within the ballpark of my research. And for example, 5 years ago, I was working on a project that looked at treatment-focused genetic testing in breast and ovarian cancer patients. In this project, patients were tested for breast and ovarian cancer mutations or BRCA mutations to determine what kind of adjuvant chemotherapy or surgery they would be best suited to on the basis of their genetic makeup. So whilst the treatment wasn't personalised at the individual level so much, basically patients were being stratified according to their genetic makeup to have treatment that was actually more appropriate for their genetic makeup and then for them, basically, if that makes any sense.
So what are the big social and ethical impacts surrounding personalised medicine and more generally the use of big data in healthcare and research?
Well, I've thought about this for a while, actually, and I think that the greatest issue for me is the ways in which the development of personalised medicine individualizes healthcare in a way that highlights the differences between people rather than the similarities on a clinical and a technical level. So this is the point, of course, of personalised medicine, tailoring treatment for individuals so that patients are much more likely to respond positively rather than negatively to their treatment. Now, I think in some ways the focus on the individual is at the heart of clinical medicine and has been for many, many years. What medicine has always done is diagnose and treat individual patients, but by using medicines that are not tailored to the individual's particular makeup. So you can see a problem here when you think about the fact that many of our medicines are developed on particular groups of people: white people, young people, and male people. Black and other ethnic minority people are often not involved in clinical research or clinical trials, and frequently women of childbearing age are also excluded. Hence, the medicines we have developed and used in a general way have only been tried and tested on a very small proportion of the population. But these medicines are then used on all of us, often with negative consequences. So personalised or precision medicine, by tailoring treatment to individuals or even stratifying populations into more precise treatment groups, i.e. groups that are much more likely to respond positively, as I said in the BRCA testing example, and benefits, can actually overcome some of the problems of using generic medicines across the board, which actually may not actually have positive effects on some individuals. Now, I think while this might improve things for many people, it's not completely unproblematic. And what I worry about, particularly as a sociologist, is the ways in which this makes us think of health and illness. It further emphasizes that health and illness is an individual or personal problem, rather than in many cases a structural or societal problem. Now, of course, it would be crazy to not say individuals don't get sick, because individual bodies do get sick and individual bodies require treatment. And when you're ill, this is indeed your problem and your family or your nearest and dearest problem. But many of the causes of ill health are societal or structural, and I worry sometimes that the emphasis on the personalisation of medicine could be interpreted as relocating the cause of all illness in individual bodies, rather than in some cases within society as a whole. For example, illness is exacerbated by poverty, living conditions, lack of education, and in some places, the lack of clean, fresh water. I think clearly, if we're going to talk about the alleviation of ill health and physical suffering, this should be targeted at individuals and populations. And I worry that the hype surrounding personalised medicine, and there are waves of hype and promissory discourses around this technology, may make us think much too much about the former, the individual, and forget the latter, population health. And tied to this point, I think, in general, is an access issue. So if we really want to improve health and treat disease, then treatments and health improvements have to be accessible for everyone. What we cannot do is develop a technology that only the richest can access, because this would just serve to exacerbate pre-existing health inequalities, both within nation states and across them. And I could go on a little more to say the other thing that I'm really interested in is the ways in which the use or need for big data solutions to healthcare problems has begun to blur the boundary between research and clinical medicine, and what this means. I'm interested in what this means concerning researchers' responsibilities and obligations to their research participants, and also, of course, research participants' expectations about what is actually being done to them and with them, if you see what I mean, Catherine. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question.
No, that's brilliant, thank you. So what questions should we, the public, be asking when it comes to the use of our data? And do you find that there's a difference between people's willingness to share data with clinicians, academic researchers, industrial partners?
I think we need to ask, what is my data being used for? Who is using it? And why my data is important? So I think if we know those questions, if we ask those questions and we get good answers to those questions, then we can be a little more confident in people using our data. I think the research at the moment suggests that people are much more supportive of academic research compared to maybe commercial research partners, industrial partners. However, I think to a certain extent, the public's response to those sort of questions is very dependent on the ways in which questions are put to them. As I think there's a lot of research which suggests that if you do a deep dive and explain in greater depth what industry involvement actually is, and how a lot of drug development and technology development just cannot take place without some form of industrial involvement, publics are much more pragmatic and accepting of commercial partners when this is explained to them. I think just saying, do you think big pharma is bad and academics are good, sort of simplifies it a little too much, and you need to really explain what is going on here. And indeed, in many cases, what happens in universities is a sort of hybridized activities. They're working alongside academic partners, or indeed research from universities is spun out into commercial ventures.
Brilliant. So finally then, if we look forward, where do you think the future of personalised medicine is going in the next decade or so? And what do you think the biggest challenges that we need to overcome would be for the implementation of personalised medicine further into the clinic?
Well, I think looking forward, I think there will be more of it. That's all. I suspect that's exactly what will happen looking forward. But I think in order to make that happen, to actually make more personalised medicine, there clearly needs to be much more data sharing. And this really requires much more transparency and public involvement and engagement. And I think the CPM plays a really important role here. So I think what we need to do as researchers in this space is build public confidence in research in personalised medicine, involve them in decision making, and pay attention to their fears and anxieties. I think also, as I said earlier, I think we need to manage public expectations about research across the board, actually, but research in healthcare in general, much better. At the moment, discourses about research in genomics and AI are very, very hyped. You know, every day you open the paper and say, we'll solve this problem, we'll do this, everything's going to be very rosy in the future. And I think we need to be much more realistic about how, when, and where this is actually going to happen, and what it means for us in general as a society. And as I talked about earlier, we need to ensure that we just don't further exacerbate pre-existing health inequalities on both an international and national scale. So I think if personalised medicine is going to benefit human health, then it must absolutely be available for all. Okay.
Brilliant, thank you. Are there any further points that you want to make before we finish?
No, I think that's more or less it. Thank you very much, Catherine, for letting me say my piece.
Bye.